Welcome back to another episode of Matthew King's Private Pilot Ground School. Today we're going to be talking about emergencies. So this is the stuff you don't want to have to talk about, you don't have to think about. We see stuff in the news just this past week. I don't know when you're watching this video, but just this past week was that historic Washington, D.C. plane crash, followed by the Philadelphia plane crash. And however, we are training you to, when you get in those situations, we talk about that hazardous attitude of invulnerability, like, no, this is not happening to me right now. But the purpose of training is that when that moment hits, you just immediately kick back to your training, which is actually, this should help you feel a little better. Most of the time when disaster and emergency hits, pilots tend to result back to their training almost very quickly. And so we're going to be talking about first emergency descents. So an emergency descent could be caused by, let's say that you see smoke in the cabin, or you literally see a fire. Maybe you have a passenger on board who is having a severe medical illness. Maybe they're having a heart attack, or maybe they passed out, and you need to get that plane on the ground as soon as possible. So that is an emergency descent. For this example, we're going to talk about, let's say we see smoke. We see smoke coming out of the cowling of the airplane right in front of us. And so we are going to go through a 3-step checklist. It's super easy to remember, ABC, 1, 2, 3. That's not 1, 2, 3, but it's ABC. So number 1 is airspeed. So the airspeed that we're going to be pitching for is pretty much as high, as much airspeed as we can put on the airplane without causing structural damage. So we're going to be pitching for that yellow arc in our airplane. Pitching for that yellow arc, and at the same time, we're going to establish a 30 to 45 degree bank. So yellow arc. And then a 30 to 45 degree bank as a turn. So that yellow arc, the reason we're pitching for that really high airspeed for a couple of reasons. Number 1, we've got an emergency. We need to get on the ground as soon as possible. Like, this plane is literally about to catch on fire. And number 2, if there is a fire, it's going to help put out the fire. So when we're traveling that fast, it's going to cool off the airplane. There's a lot of wind resistance. We may potentially put out the fire. And then we're also going to establish that bank. So that bank allows us to not put as much load factor, as much G-force on the airplane as if we were to just kind of pitch straight down. And also as well, we're also, what we're about to jump in next is B, best landing spot. Best landing spot. So that bank is also going to allow us to kind of see around us what landing spots are available. So first we pitch for our best airspeed. Number 2 is B. We are looking for our best landing spot. So ideally, we want to find an airport. If there's no airport available, probably a good, nice open field. If there's no field available, we're kind of looking for a road. Obviously the road is kind of last resort you want to get to. A lot of times we have power lines going over those roads. And obviously there are cars on the road 95% of the time. All right, so we found our best landing spot. We're pitching for that airspeed. We're maintaining that bank. And then number C is going to be communicate. And also checklist. So what do we mean by communicate? If we're not already on a towered frequency, or if we're not on flight following or whatnot, we're going to want to put in 121.5. That is the universal, or the US emergency frequency, 121.5. Very important number to remember. You get on there, you say, hey, or mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Skyhawk 739 Romeo Lima. We have an engine fire. We are 20 miles north of the Milledgeville Airport, planning on landing in a field. So what you just did is you communicated over an emergency frequency, and you let them know the situation. They're going to be able to get out the emergency stuff as quickly as possible. They'll also kind of communicate back with you, and kind of if there's any help you need, or if there's any additional information that they need, they'll get that from you. So we'll communicate 121.5. We're also going to squawk 7700. So 7700, we're going to put that into our transponder, and so that's going to also notify that we are an aircraft in distress. All right, so we've communicated, and we're going to run through our checklist. So depending on what the emergency is going to depend on what checklist you use. You want to get familiar with those checklists. So let's say we see smoke. So there's a difference between the smokes. So if you see black smoke, most of the time it's an engine fire. And so you're going to want to go through your engine fire checklist. So what that's going to consist of is turning almost everything off: mixture cut off, throttle idle, mixture cut off. We're going to turn our mags off. Anything that is a part of our engine system, which if you're not familiar with your engine systems and electrical systems, get familiar with those, so you understand kind of what in the cockpit controls what. And we're going to run through that checklist, and then prepare for our emergency landing. Now, if you see white smoke, most of the time it's an electrical fire. So if it's an electrical fire, you'll go through that checklist, which consists of turning off everything that is electrically driven. So that could be avionics, that could be radios. And if you are about to cut your radio off, you want to let air traffic control know, hey, like, I think we have an electrical fire. This is going to be my last transmission. I have to turn my radio off. All your lights are coming off. And so, yeah. Now, if it's, a passenger in the back of your airplane who's sick, there's nothing physically wrong with the airplane. You probably don't want to be turning radios off. You don't want to be turning your engine off because they're operating fine. But now, if for some reason, that is pretty much it. Let me make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Now, let's say you are preparing for a landing, a power off landing in a field. A few things to keep in mind. If possible, now it is an emergency situation, try and figure out where the wind is coming from. And so just like how we teach our ground reference maneuvers, if you can find some smoke near the ground or a flag, or see which way the wind is blowing, because more than likely that's going to be a pretty small field, and if you can have as much landing distance as possible, try and do that. And so remember, we're holding a bank, and so if you can use that bank to get you kind of on what would normally be a final approach where you have the headwind, that would be pretty ideal. Now, just before landing, make sure that engine is completely cut off if you haven't already turned it off. And you're going to want to prop your door open in order to get ready for pretty much a ditching. You want to get out of that airplane as soon as possible once those wheels touch down, and get away from it, especially if it's on fire. It could potentially blow up. You've got a lot of fuel in there. Definitely not something that I know my parents like me to talk about. They're afraid when I go flying. But it's just stuff we got to be aware of, stuff we got to be prepared for, because it happens, and you just got to be ready for it. So yeah, this is an emergency descent.